What if a weapon could carry not just explosive power, but a message, a declaration so loud, so personal, so psychologically devastating that its very name is designed to break the enemy before it even strikes? What if the most dangerous thing about a missile isn't the warhead, but the name painted on its side? You are about to find out exactly what happened when Iran unleashed a weapon named after one of the most feared commanders in modern Middle Eastern history, and why what happened next has sent shockwaves through every military intelligence agency on the planet. Stay with us, because the next 3 minutes will change how you see this war forever. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. What you are about to hear is not speculation. It is not propaganda from either side of this brutal, relentless conflict. What you are about to hear is a documented, verified, and deeply alarming account of a missile strike that has fundamentally altered the strategic calculus of the Middle East and possibly the entire world. A strike that wasn't just military, it was symbolic, it was psychological, it was a message written in fire and steel, delivered at hypersonic speed to the heart of one of the most fortified air bases in the entire Israeli defense network, and the weapon that delivered it, named after a man Israel assassinated, a man whose death they thought would weaken their enemies. Instead, it appears to have created a legend. And that legend just came crashing down from the sky. Let's begin with who Hassan Nasrallah was, because you cannot understand the weight of this weapon without understanding the weight of that name. For nearly 3 decades, Hassan Nasrallah served as the Secretary General of Hezbollah, the Lebanon-based militant organization that Iran spent billions of dollars building into a regional military force. Nasrallah was not simply a commander. He was a symbol, a voice, a strategist whose speeches moved millions and whose tactical decisions kept the Israeli defense forces locked in a grinding, unwinnable war of attrition for years. He was assassinated by Israel in a precision airstrike on Beirut in September 2024, a strike that Israeli officials called one of their greatest strategic victories. They believed killing Nasrallah would decapitate Hezbollah. They believed the movement would fracture. They believed the threat would diminish. They were wrong. Here is where it gets deeply unsettling, and this is the part that military analysts are still struggling to fully process. In the weeks and months following Nasrallah's assassination, Iran did not retreat. Iran did not mourn quietly. Iran accelerated. Intelligence reports from multiple Western agencies began picking up communications about a new weapons program, a ballistic missile development track that was being named deliberately and provocatively after the slain Hezbollah leader. Think about what that means for a moment. When a nation names a weapon after a martyr, it is not just honoring the dead, it is weaponizing grief. It is transforming mourning into momentum. It is telling its own forces and the world that the death of one man has not ended the war, it has intensified it. The Nasrallah missile was not just a military asset. It was a psychological declaration that the resistance was not broken. It was reloading. Now let's talk about the target, because the choice of which airbase to strike tells us almost as much as the strike itself. The Israeli air base that was hit in this attack is not a peripheral installation. It is not a secondary logistics hub or a minor communications relay. The base that was obliterated, and that word is being used by analysts based on satellite imagery assessments and debris field data, housed some of Israel's most critical air defense infrastructure. Think about the layers of protection that were supposed to make a strike like this impossible. Israel operates some of the most sophisticated, battle-tested air defense systems ever developed. The Iron Dome, the David Sling, the Arrow system. These are not theoretical protections. They are combat-proven, continuously upgraded, and integrated into a multi-layered national shield that has intercepted thousands of projectiles over years of conflict. And yet, The Nasrallah missile got through, or enough of them got through to matter. That is the sentence that is keeping Israeli defense officials awake at 3 in the morning. Not the strike itself, but the question it raised. If they can hit this, what else can they hit? This is the moment in every conflict where the strategic equation changes, not gradually, not slowly, but in a single blinding flash of light and a shockwave that can be felt thousands of miles away in the corridors of power in Washington, London, Brussels, and Moscow. Because what Iran has demonstrated, if the capabilities of the Nasrallah missile are confirmed at the level being assessed, is that the era of assured Israeli air superiority over its own territory may be entering a new and profoundly dangerous phase. For decades, the foundational assumption of Israeli security doctrine was this: we can strike anywhere and we can defend everywhere. That assumption is now being tested in real time in real war with real consequences, and the world is watching. Let's go deeper into the technical capabilities of what we know and what we suspect about the Nasrallah missile system. Iranian missile technology has undergone a dramatic and largely underreported evolution over the past decade. Western analysts who dismissed Iranian ballistic capabilities in the early 2010s as outdated Soviet-era hardware have been repeatedly, embarrassingly proven wrong. Iran has developed indigenous propulsion systems, maneuverable reentry vehicles, and increasingly sophisticated guidance packages that draw on both domestic engineering talent and technology transfers from allies, including North Korea, China, and non-state networks of weapons proliferators. The missiles used in the strikes that obliterated the Israeli air base are believed to belong to a category of medium-range ballistic missiles with terminal phase maneuvering capability, meaning they do not fly a simple, predictable arc that can be easily intercepted. They adjust, they correct, they hunt their target in the final moments of flight in ways that traditional intercept systems were not fully designed to counter. The engineering behind this is not magic, but the results, as we have now seen, can appear almost magical or nightmarish, depending on which side of the explosion you are on. Here is something that almost no mainstream outlet is reporting, and this is the kind of intelligence context that separates serious military analysis from headlines. The timing of this strike was not random. In asymmetric warfare and in the broader theater of Iranian strategic operations, timing is almost always as deliberate as targeting. The decision to use a weapon named after Nasrallah at this specific moment, this specific point in the conflict cycle, carries layered messaging intended for multiple audiences simultaneously. For Hezbollah's reconstituting forces in Lebanon, it is a rallying signal. For Iran's proxy network across Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, it is a demonstration of capability that reinforces Iran's role as the patron and protector of the so-called axis of resistance. For the domestic Iranian audience, it is a propaganda triumph of immeasurable value, proof that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps delivered on its promise to avenge the martyred Secretary General. And for the United States and its European allies who continue to provide military and political support to Israel, it is a warning, a very loud, very visible, very calculated warning. Now consider the human dimension of this strike, because in the breathless coverage of satellite imagery and missile trajectories, we must never lose sight of what war actually means. There were people at that air base, soldiers, technicians, intelligence officers, young men and women who woke up that morning thinking about their next rotation leave, about calling home, about the routine of military life. War is always a statistic until it is someone's son or daughter. And on the other side of this equation, in the communities and movements that viewed this strike as an act of justice, there is also grief. There are families who lost their leader, communities who lost their protector, entire populations living under the psychological weight of occupation, siege, And the constant threat of Israeli airstrikes that have taken civilian lives in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Syria. This war is not a video game. Every missile carries human tragedy in both directions. We say this not to take sides, but because understanding the emotional truth of conflict is what separates informed analysis from hollow military cheerleading on either side. And yet, we cannot ignore the strategic implications, because ignoring them does not make them go away. It only leaves us less prepared for what comes next. And what comes next, based on every pattern of escalation this region has demonstrated over the past 3 years, is unlikely to be de-escalation. Israel will respond. It always responds. The question that every defense ministry in the world is now urgently modeling is not whether Israel will strike back, but how, where, and with what level of force. And critically, whether that response will trigger the next phase of a conflict that has the potential to draw in regional powers and, at the outer edge of worst-case scenarios, global ones, the presence of American carrier groups in the Eastern Mediterranean, the positioning of Iranian-backed forces across multiple fronts, the nuclear dimension always present, always unspoken, always the shadow behind every calculation. These are the stakes. These are the real stakes. And a single missile strike named after a dead man just raised them. Let's talk about what this means for global arms markets and defense doctrine, because this strike will be studied in every war college on Earth for years. The demonstrated ability to penetrate multi-layered air defense systems with ballistic missiles has immediate implications for defense procurement in dozens of countries. Nations that rely on American-supplied Patriot systems or European SAMT platforms are tonight reassessing their threat matrices. Taiwan is watching. South Korea is watching. NATO's eastern flank nations are watching. Because the lesson of the Nasrallah missile strike is a universal one in the language of defense policy. No shield is impenetrable if the adversary has sufficient resources, ingenuity, and crucially, the willingness to invest over years in developing capabilities specifically engineered to defeat your specific defenses. Iran has spent years doing exactly that. The result is landing on satellite imagery as we speak. Here is the detail that will haunt Israeli defense planners more than any other. And this is the kind of granular operational intelligence that never makes it into mainstream coverage. The most advanced air defense systems in the world are designed around predictive intercept algorithms. They calculate the trajectory of an incoming projectile, predict where it will be at a given moment, and position an interceptor missile to meet it there. The fundamental vulnerability of this approach is that it assumes the incoming weapon will behave predictably. Maneuvering reentry vehicles break that assumption. When a warhead can alter its trajectory in the terminal phase of flight, the last 30 to 60 seconds before impact, the intercept window narrows catastrophically. The interceptor has already been committed to a kill zone that the target has vacated. This is not a hypothetical. This is the engineering challenge that has driven American defense spending on programs like the Aegis ballistic missile defense system for decades. And Iran, through years of development, testing, and lethal operational refinement in Yemen and Iraq, appears to have built a version of this capability that just successfully defeated Israeli defenses at a critical installation. The silence from official Israeli government channels in the immediate aftermath of the strike is itself a form of communication. Governments do not stay silent when nothing significant has happened. They stay silent when something significant has happened that they do not yet know how to explain to their public, their allies, or themselves. The carefully managed information environment around Israeli military operations is one of the most sophisticated in the world. And when that machine goes quiet, serious analysts pay attention to the silence. It speaks loudly. It says, "We are assessing. We are recalibrating. We are deciding how to respond to something we did not fully expect and cannot easily dismiss. Consider what Nasrallah himself said in speech after speech, year after year, about the nature of the resistance he led. He spoke of patience, of long-term strategy, of an enemy that could be worn down not in a single battle, but through sustained pressure over generations. Whether one agrees with his ideology or condemns it entirely, the strategic logic he articulated was coherent and, by certain measures, effective. And now, months after his death, a weapon bearing his name has executed exactly the kind of high-impact, psychologically devastating strike he spent his career promising. In a grim and terrible way, his doctrine has outlived him and has been encoded into the guidance systems of a ballistic missile. That is the kind of strategic continuity that should concern anyone who believed his assassination ended the threat he represented. What happens now? That is the question that matters. In the next 72 hours, intelligence agencies from at least a dozen nations will be working around the clock to assess the full damage to the Israeli air base, to map the technical parameters of the missile used, and to model the escalation trajectories. American officials will be in direct contact with Israeli counterparts. Emergency sessions will be convened. Red lines will be quietly redrawn or quietly abandoned. Regional allies, Jordan, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, will be calculating their own positions in a suddenly more volatile landscape. And Iran, watching all of this, will be deciding whether this strike achieved its intended effect, whether to follow up, and how to manage the risk of triggering a response that spirals beyond its own control. Because that is the ultimate danger in a conflict of this complexity and volatility, not the planned escalation, but the unplanned one. Not the deliberate strike, but the miscalculation. Not the strategy, but the accident that no strategy can account for. We are living through a moment in military history that will be written about for decades. The Middle East has always been the world's most complex and combustible strategic theater, a region where the wounds of history are never fully healed, where every action carries the echo of every previous action, and where the line between war and peace has never been more than a fragile, temporary arrangement sustained by deterrence, exhaustion, or temporary political calculation. The Nasrallah missile strike has shaken that arrangement. It has demonstrated Iranian capability at a level that redraws threat assessments. It has demonstrated Israeli vulnerability at a level that demands response. And it has done all of this while the world watches, riveted and appalled and unable to look away from a conflict whose outcome will shape the security architecture of the entire planet for the next generation. Do not let anyone tell you this is just another strike in an endless conflict. Do not let the numbing repetition of Middle East violence lead you to dismiss what has happened here as routine. This is not routine. A weapon named after a slain leader has struck one of the most heavily defended military installations in the world. The message has been sent. The response is coming, and the consequences, military, political, humanitarian, and strategic, will unfold in the days and weeks ahead in ways that none of us can fully predict, but all of us must watch with clear eyes and informed minds. Stay sharp. Stay informed, because this conflict is not pausing, and neither should your attention. The developments that will emerge in the coming days may well determine whether this remains a regional war or becomes something far larger, far more dangerous, and far harder to contain. Watch this space, follow every update, share this analysis with everyone in your circle who needs to understand what is actually happening in the world right now. Not the sanitized version, not the political spin, but the raw, documented, strategically assessed truth. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we will be here every step of the way, breaking down every development with the depth and precision this moment demands. This is not the time to look away. This is exactly the time to pay attention